Today, I'm joined by Jess Baker. Jess is a chartered business psychologist with over 20 years of experience coaching high achievers and advising global brands. She is the creator of the empathy powered method and author of the award winning book, The Super Helper Syndrome, which is now translated into multiple languages. A sought after speaker and guest lecturer at Cambridge Judge Business School, her work has been featured in outlets like The Telegraph, BBC, and ITV News. Through her coaching, speaking, and her new YouTube channel, Powered by Empathy, Jess helps people transform overlooked talent into calm, credible leaders. And I'm excited to have her on the show to learn from her expertise. So, Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Thank you. It's really good to be here. Cheers.
Yes, it's great to meet you, and I'm excited to talk about this subject because I think we've had some discussions about empathy in the past, but I think it's such an important issue, and it's oftentimes overlooked. One of the main reasons it's considered sometimes a soft skill, and I always say that we tend to focus on hard skills a lot with leadership training, and we miss out on these soft skills. But so you're known for transforming empathy, like which is considered oftentimes a soft skill into a serious leadership advantage. So how did your journey go from being a business psychologist and then eventually getting you to create this empathy powered leadership method?
Actually, do you mind if I go back before becoming a business psychologist? Because I
Sure.
think my relationship with empathy began, actually, when I was born. I was what's known as a parentified child. So I was given a lot of emotional responsibility as a youngster. I had a childminder who used to look after me after school, and she role modeled compassion and unconditional love and a lot of empathy. At the age of 12, I wanted to be a clinical psychologist and I wanted to work with children with emotional and behavioral difficulties. I went straight through uni, did a couple of degrees, realized that clinical psychology wasn't for me when I ended up working with patients who are experiencing dementia. I worked in some nursing homes. I worked on some really interesting research projects as well. But I realized that I didn't have much by way of an emotional boundary, I think. So that led me back to plan B, which was to always be a business psychologist. So a master's degree, and then I chartered. So that's like a doctoral level degree. Um, and so I think empathy has always been there. Empathy has always and compassion have always been there as part of my life and my raison d'etre, I suppose. And with business psychology, you'll know the term emotional intelligence. Your audience will have heard of that. Empathy plays one of the five factors in emotional intelligence, and I sound like it might be five, it might be six, because sometimes it's changing. And Daniel Goleman, who created the that model in the first place, is always kind of coming up with something new. And I believe there's a new book on the horizon. So taking empathy, I think, is an interesting thing. So just a couple of years ago, it struck me that with the corporate work I'm doing, and I kind of became part of that movement, in compassionate leadership. In fact, let me step back a second and just define those terms as I use them,
Yeah,
if that's okay, because we
that'd be
throw
great.
around empathy and compassion and sympathy and what have you all the time, but to define them in this way might be easier for everyone to get onto the same page. So empathy includes at least two aspects. There's a cognitive empathy, which is I understand someone is experiencing an emotion. For example, I understand someone is suffering. It's a cognitive ability. The second is an emotional ability where I feel with you. It's actually a term, an English psychologist picked it up from a German psychologist, I believe. The term was Einfühlung, feeling with or feeling into. And I'll come back to that later on because that's quite important. What's happened is that we've we've then so I argue, for example, in my book The Super Helper Syndrome, that empathy is a precursor to compassion. It's like empathy says, I know you're suffering, I feel your pain, and then compassion says, and what can I do about that? How
Mm.
can I help you alleviate that? And I think that's beautiful. That's a lovely pairing. um, and so to kind of come back to your question, to stick with how did it become how did I focus on the empathy powered method? I think for me, I became quickly part of that compassionate leadership um, framing or movement. I thought it was just lovely and delicious, and I practiced self-compassion as well as being compassionate to others. And then I suddenly realized this isn't working as well as I or my corporate clients want it to be working, because you get a number of people in a room, for example, middle or senior managers, and you say, right, for the next 3 days or for the next 3 weeks or for the next 6 months, you're going to be on this program to become more compassionate. And what do you get? Immediately, you get 50-60% of those people with their arms folded.
Hmm.
And they'll sit there and say, okay, like I'm performing well enough. My team is hitting their targets. There aren't any complaints from customers, and I'm not a bully, but do I really need to be here? Do I really need to learn how to
Hmm.
be more compassionate? And then you get the rest of them going, oh, great, how? And the ones going, great, how, and really engaged in it, I find, and if you look at the research, you'll see that usually people who benefit from compassionate leadership programs are already those with high levels of inherent empathy. They're
It's
already the
so
ones who
true.
get it.
Yes, it's so true. I talk about that. The biggest problem with having a leadership podcast and write leadership books is the people that read it are already great leaders and they're just trying to get better. So I'm preaching to the choir as opposed to finding the people that really need the message. So it's interesting that you found the same thing with compassionate leadership, is that the people who are like, yes, tell me more, we're already probably pretty good at that already, which is very interesting. And the people that need to hear the message have crossed arms and are looking at you funny.
Yeah,
So
exactly. With that element, and that physical barrier, the arms crossed or what have you, or the jacket doesn't know if that I've worked with, in finance, and the jacket stays on and all week. And it's like, okay, this is obviously not the right program actually for these people to be running, but it sounds nice. It sounds like a tick box exercise. The organization feels better for running it. Learning and development can say, well, we tried. Um, but I think that's where, to fully answer your question, then to come into that final point, what I'm what I'm working on now and what I have been doing is helping empathic people prepare for leadership roles, because you'll know this. Okay, so I really want to hear your examples on this as well, Jon. Whenever I've had a coaching client who's been highly empathic, they've usually come to me saying either they think I'm ready for promotion, but I don't think I am, or I'm being overlooked and everyone else is being put forward. Even the people that I've developed over the years are now being put forward for promotions or leadership roles ahead of me. And so I've noticed this unfortunate thing that happens, a phenomena, that empathy got you to where you are, being kind, accommodating, tuning into others, supporting others, being conscientious, getting the job done, being extremely capable at what you do because you care. However, it only gets you so far.
mm,
So what I'm focused on is really finding those empathic people that are and have been overlooked, feeling undervalued and probably about to leave your organization or your team, and helping them be a better leader by somehow, well, not somehow, it's not by magic, I know the answer, to help them now perform empathy, express empathy as a um, as a strategic asset, as a leader would. So they
mm.
come from being the invisible supporter in the sidelines or in the shadows and not asking for the resources they need, and taking on other people's work, to actually being in the front, taking the lead, holding
Yeah,
boundaries,
yeah.
being confident, promoting themselves and others, where they need to, where they can, and giving themselves credit where other people aren't. So there's this whole transition that one needs to go through if you've ever experienced empathy as a kind of thing that's holding you back, to actually making it work for you instead. What's your
Yeah.
thing?
No, I think it's a real issue and a concern. I think that, for example, one of the things I've realized, like for most of my career, I thought I was a servant leader, that because that was a well communicated leadership, type archetype, and I thought, well, that's who I am. Because am empathetic, and I do care about my employees. I do listen to them. However, I've always been I've always believed that leadership is about people and results. So my business has also achieved very good things because I was trying to kind of move employees like empathetic to their needs and their concerns, but also in response to the goals that we would have as an organization. So, and what I find is that people who are empathetic and potentially leaders do a really good job of taking care of their people, right? And assuming that they're going to get the results as as a result of their kindness or their servant leadership approach, but oftentimes they don't get the results. And so then they get passed over, looked over. So I think one of the transformational leadership has been more attractive to me because it's sort of like it has a lot of the elements of servant leadership, but it's in, you're helping people transform themselves personally in pursuit of the organizational objectives. And so that has always felt more comfortable to me once I learned what transformational leadership looked like. So I think there is a problem. And even Jim Collins and Good to Great mentioned that, the characteristic of a level 5 leaders that created these great companies are often the type of people that never make it to CEO roles because of their humble personality and their quiet personalities, and they're focusing on other things other than just pure drive and towards personal gain. So he was very concerned about it. So the best CEOs in the world look like this, but it's rare that they make it to the top. So what you're doing, trying to get these great leaders to move ahead in their career, I think is a very important work.
Thank you. And I think I one of my methods or one of my tools that I use is called the leadership dials, where, coming back to this point, where people will say, "Oh, I've been told to raise my profile at work." Okay, what's difficult for you? Well, I don't like self-promotion and I don't want to be that person who does promote themselves at work. Have you met them? And they'll
Yeah.
kind of screw up their nose. And I know what they're thinking, and I know what kind of, maybe type A personality, they're really kind of going for it. They're really hungry. And of course, the people at the top, to your very point, are already like that as well. They are type
Exactly.
A. They want people, they want to recruit and to promote in their own image. Therefore, they're not going to see that much value in someone who does have a softer tone or a quieter approach. But it doesn't mean that that soft tone or the quieter approach isn't really powerful and isn't actually the thing that's holding your whole business together. And if you overlook that for 1 second, you've lost them and they're going
Yes.
to move on. And coaches like me will be saying, get the hell out of there because they don't deserve you.
Right.
And
Right.
actually, there are ways, like using the leadership dials, that there are ways to look at all of your inherent qualities and your strengths to say which ones do you want to turn up that still
Mm.
feels like you,
Yeah.
still feels like you. I'm never going to say to anybody, change or become someone else or be more like someone else. But what characteristics do you have that you can turn up or turn down if needs be, um, to enable other people to see you slightly differently? To enable others to pick you, to choose you more easily. Do you know
Mm.
what I mean? Rather than you having to feel like you have to be out there selling yourself, there are ways in which you can use your own empathy. You can use all of those beautiful inherent skills of tuning into people, anticipating how they're going to respond to you, etc. And you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think one of the things with empathy, as you mentioned, it's we kind of go down a path of compassionate leadership, which is, you kind of, you're sensing the suffering and of employees, and you're trying to help make their conditions better. But doesn't empathy also help us in other ways as leaders, right? Not just the suffering or the challenges or the feeling, but also to get a team, fired up and moving towards an objective and a goal, and sensing, what they need at the moment, what the team needs at the moment, to be able to kind of rally together to come towards achieving objectives. So is empathy more than just, identifying with the suffering, but also the other side of the coin as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so easy to miss the other side of empathy, the kind of the forgotten side of it. It's not as sexy maybe as, pain and suffering and compassion. And it's probably it's also easier for us. I believe I read a paper the other day that a kind of neuroscientific approach is that the brain doesn't find it easy to be happy, and we know the brain is wired to protect itself.
Right.
So we're going to go there, we're going to see the pain, we're going to want to focus on that more frequently than the joyful stuff. But you're absolutely right. And one of the concepts I'm working on at the moment. I've coined this phrase, euphoresis. And if you'll allow me, if you'll allow me to indulge for a moment, John, on this,
Yeah.
I'm so excited about it because for all the work I've done, writing the book was a really beautiful and painful process in many ways. I interviewed over 50 people for that who had experienced and self-identified as someone who had helped to their detriment of their own well-being. And so I tried to treat that data very carefully. And if you get around to reading the book, you'll see excerpts from those interviews of people who do see the pain, do see the suffering, and do their utmost. They go above and beyond, to help others. And in the book, I unpack some irrational beliefs that we might hold. So, and you might recognize some of these. I must help everyone, or I must help others to prove I'm a good person, or they couldn't survive without me, and etc. And the other one is really important. I don't believe I should have any needs.
Mm.
So you couple the compulsive helping with the desire or the belief rather that you shouldn't have any needs, and suddenly you're in trouble. And this is applied to the workplace as readily as it's applied to our personal lives too. But I think to move back into euphoresis, then what we get is, how we defined empathy earlier, rather. Empathy, if when empathy sees the pain and suffering, we have compassion that jumps in to alleviate it. Compassion acts as that desire or that motivator to alleviate the pain. But empathy also sees the joy.
Mm.
And with that, we get excitement, like some of the England teams, women's teams have just won recently in rugby and in football. And I'm not a spectator, but I watched those finals like it was the best thing on, and it really mattered. And so when they won, I feel like the sense of euphoria, I'm with them. I don't feel jealous. I don't feel envious. I don't think I wish that was happening to me. I am purely glad and I am purely grateful to have witnessed the magic. So that's lovely. So we know we have the capacity to do that. And empathy allows us to know that someone is experiencing joy, or success or happiness, contentment, whatever positive emotion. But what do we do with that? How do I act upon it? If empathy plus pain equals compassion, what does empathy plus joy equal? Well, euphoresis. So we take that. We
Yeah.
take that joy. You might come to me and say, Jess, I had this amazing success today in my business. Someone I've been mentoring for years has now got their promotion, or they did really well in X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's amazing, John. That's fantastic. So you're sharing actually someone else's joy with me. It's a kind of vicarious
Yeah.
passing on or ripple effect of someone else's joy, but it's your joy that I'm experiencing. And so I want to say, wow, how did you do that? And so euphoresis really is about amplifying that good. It's tuning into your joy, your positive emotion, the good here, and saying, and how can we amplify that?
Mm.
And I might say, how did you do that? Wow, give me notes. I want to be able to apply that to my team or to someone else when I'm coaching them. And so there's suddenly this beautiful ripple effect of, I call it the empathic flow, where it's flowing, it continues from you through me to the next person, and it never doesn't have to end.
Mm.
um I'll stop there. Does it make How much sense does that make? Because it's such a new concept. But I think I think the common sense is there. The word is new. That's all.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I know that, many, leadership authors, Colin Powell, for example, he was, a famous American general. He would always say that the mood of the leader can affect the mood of the organization, right? Your mood can affect the organization. So if you're sensing joy and you're able to radiate that joy in the organization, that other people pick up on that, and then you kind of increase that. So I think, whereas empathy sort of a lot of times goes towards the being sensitive towards suffering or hardship, I think you're onto something, which is also sensing when things are going well, and to amplify that and to use that as a way to energize the team. This is what we do when we're doing big change projects, is that we find those little early wins, and we talk about those early wins with the team. So we energize them based on, so we get the feeling, this is actually going to work, this new thing that we're trying to do. And here's a great story of how it is working. So to amplify those. And I think part of the empathy, and maybe I'm wrong here too, but it's sort of sensing not just on the individual basis, but the team like sensing what the team needs at any point in time. I think that's probably, I think of it as a superpower. I mean, as far as like being a leadership practitioner for years, is sensing what a team needs at a particular time is, and I see so many, I would say, non-empathetic leaders who, say something that is just not appropriate. When the mood is a certain way and the team needs something to be said, and you have an unempathetic leader come in and just deadpan the corporate policy, and everybody just goes, oh great. So I think part of a superpower is sensing what the team needs at any point in time to rally the troops towards whatever the next objective is, or overcoming a failure that just happened, or what have you. Does that make sense, that empathy is part of that, is sensing the team and what the team needs?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it's often even going kind of narrowing in on that and saying, what do individual members of my team need right now?
Mm,
Because you might find
yeah.
that some members of that team are pretty thick-skinned, are happy just to get on with the job. They're going to continue to be focused. Everything else in their life is working really well. They're not particularly troubled at the moment about anything else, so nothing is seeping into their working life. Whereas others may well, at the other extreme, their whole life is unraveling for another reason, personal life, difficulties, etc. And just one more thing at work, a level of uncertainty about
Yeah.
being redundant, or the extra pressure to do things or to take on more work because of another team member going sick. Any of those real world scenarios can affect people differently. And I think
Mm,
you're absolutely right. Being able to read the team is really important. And I think being able to read individuals and being able to tune in is the superpower to what each one of those like. So it's not a kind of blanket or like, my style is very empathic and very kind of um, can be very lovey-dovey. I managed a team of 3 women for several years back in the financial sector. Um, and I knew there were different personalities, but it was my style, and my style that worked for me and for them at that time, even though we're in this awfully corporate grey glass environment in Canary Wharf, we still had a lot of fun,
yeah.
and we still connected with each other at an emotional level as well. But yeah, as the leader, you have to be able to to read them. And if you can't read them, then that comes to the second point, really, I suppose. What do you think about this? Asking them,
Mm,
what do you need? What do you need from me right now? I can't fix all of your other problems, and not necessarily, I'm not suggesting that you say this phrase, but the attitude is, I can't fix any of your other problems outside work. Actually, I can't even fix this one because none of us know whether you are going to be made redundant or not, or that's highly, confidential information. But how can I help you now? How can I
mm,
support you best right now? And what do you need from me? Because often I think that's the next piece that's missing.
mm,
It's not a magic. There's no magic here as such for the majority of us, even the empathic ones who have a deep understanding innately of others. We are also asking the question, how can I help? John, what do
yeah.
you really need right now? Look, and I'll try my best to get it for you. If I can't give it to you, I'll find someone else that can. We'll find the resources to support you.
I really like that. So I think, leaders might be listening in and saying, well, I'm not naturally empathetic. So we're talking about empathy, but I struggle with that, right? Sensing other people's feelings. But you just unlocked sort of the secret, which is ask people, right? On a regular basis, have the conversation. And then you'll understand more. Maybe you're missing out on the nonverbals, you're missing out on the little phrases that are here and there, which can sometimes be subtle. So maybe you have to say, tell me, what can I do differently, or how can I help you? How can I support what you're doing? Then you actually have that in a way that, for the less empathetic people, can say, okay, I can work on that. You've just given me something concrete that I can work on. The other thing, I don't know if this makes any sense, but as a leader in different organizations, I've always liked to have somebody on my team that had a sense of the mood of the majority of the people, like that was even more empathetic than me on my leadership team, that I could refer to and saying, what's the mood on the shop floor? What about this new policy? Someone that is not me, because oftentimes we as leaders change the dynamic in the room just by us being in the room. So sometimes we
Mm.
need to have people on our team that that are not with the big fancy title like CEO or senior vice president. That like when we go in a room, we affect things, and I recognize that. And so, but having someone on our team that can actually sense the mood of the team and kind of help us understand things without us actually being involved. Does that make any sense, or
Yeah.
how does that play with you?
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And I think especially if you do recognize that you are one step away or two or three steps away from what's really happening on the, as you say, the shop floor, having somebody, even if they're not in your team, but being able to go to
Yeah.
someone, and in a large organization that might be the HR director, or that might be someone else, or that might be the here in the UK we have human resources business partners. So they'll be
Mm-hmm.
part of the human resources team, but they'll specifically work with a particular function. And they are usually the best people to go to say, what's the vibe over there? You know, if we roll this out, what are they going to say? You know, what do they
Yeah.
really need to do? And I think that's beautiful. So when you don't have it yourself, you outsource it and you say, right, what's the vibe? And how can we work with that? What's the information that we can glean from that? And how can we how can we work with it? I think that's great.
Yeah. So now you one of the things you work on is you're helping people who are naturally empathetic not get looked over, right? To be able to use that, as we talked about earlier, as a superpower for them to be even more effective as a leader. What are some areas? So if we have listeners on here that are maybe more empathetic and maybe they feel that they're getting passed over because they're naturally that way, what are some things that they could kind of work on to actually get noticed and recognized for who they are and the contributions they can make to the organization?
Mm. Thanks. I think that's a lovely question. There are a number of things of experiences that you might recognize, and that includes if you feel invisible at any point. It's like a really it's a dark place to go. But if you're wondering like, what am I doing in this team? What am I really doing in this organization? Do they really value me? That's a really strong sign. That's part of your intuition. That's telling you you're not valued. You
Hmm.
know, that's not a small inner critical voice beating you up. You know, that's possibly a sign that, yeah, you're not in the right, they don't value you and they probably never will.
Hmm.
So sometimes coming to that realization is very difficult, especially if
Hmm.
you feel settled in, especially if you feel like, well, I'm happy here and I just want to get paid and I don't actually need to do very much differently. So that can be a sign. There are lots of different small ones. One of them is that you've been told to raise your profile. Well, you
Hmm.
didn't get that promotion because no one really knows about you, or you haven't really done anything big and sexy recently, or you haven't done anything particularly meaningful, or you haven't contributed in a particular way. Whereas you'd think, well, I have, and that thing only happened because of the work I did
Hmm.
after hours in the dark at home where nobody else saw, and I missed a few weekends, and I took my laptop on holiday. They don't know about that. You haven't communicated just how hard you're working because you see yourself as maybe a rescuer. You see yourself as somebody who should take responsibility for things that aren't your responsibility. That's another sign. I call this the responsibility net, where you suddenly absorb other people's problems, deadlines, projects, people issues. You know, they'll come to you and they'll say, "Oh, I'm really struggling dealing with X at the moment. You know, how do I cope with that, and what do I do in response?" And you're the one almost managing their team vicariously through them by saying, well,
Yeah.
have you asked them what kind of support they need? You know, have you spent any time just listening to them and, you know, asking for more information about that thing? So it might be that um you're also, so you're invisible, you're overcompensating, you're doing a lot but you're not getting the credit for it. You find it difficult to promote yourself. And there's a huge, I hear this so often, it hurts. There's, in the mind of the classic empathic professional, asking for credit or even saying, I did this thing that was really valuable. Even saying that, okay, is hard because to the
Hmm.
empathic professional, they're thinking, oh my God, but that makes me sound really arrogant. And
Hmm.
suddenly they leap from, you know, to being a really horrible person. They leap in their minds, in their mind's eye, to being a really arrogant and, you know, the worst kind of person that they could be. But that's never going to happen. So I have to do a lot of kind of reframing with my
Yeah.
coaching clients. Say, even if you tried to be rude, you probably wouldn't come across as very rude compared to most people. because you've got because that's not in your repertoire, do you know, of behaviors.
Right.
So I've taken a number of people recently through a program where I help them identify their skills, their strengths, their natural qualities, um, and help them really amplify that effect and help them see the detail, the facts. Well, how did that help you in that project, that scenario, that job, that team? When you mentored them, when you coached them, and suddenly they can see, like, it kind of almost unpacks this list of their CV, if you like. Oh, well, there are loads of examples where I have used all my beautiful skills and strengths, and now I can honor that
Yeah.
by sharing them and making them more visible to others. And it's okay to say, oh, and by the way, do you know I'm quietly supporting 5 other people through emotional trauma right now, at work. It's okay to say that.
Mm,
Otherwise, they'll never know.
right.
And then you've got
Right.
these people who are technically capable, probably, um, or very good at speaking about themselves, excellent at speaking over other people in the meetings, or claiming something as their own work. Whereas our lovely empathic professionals are saying, "Oh no, it was team effort. Oh no, I didn't do
Right.
anything." So it's in our language as well. So there are lots of different ways in which it might reveal itself. So it's about a little bit of self-awareness and being honest with yourself. Actually, am I doing any of these things?
That's great. I love that. It's such a good advice. And again, we need more empathetic leaders at the top of organizations. So please, follow this advice because we really do need more empathy at the top of organizations. There's a severe lack of it in a lot of organizations, at least my experience in the corporate world. So, uh, Jess, this has been fantastic. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Oh, I think whilst we were just talking about the joy of empathy and sharing it, I think let's go back to basics with empathy and overdrive, where I want to invite the audience to an empathic inquiry where they understand themselves better and they begin to see their empathy play out in different ways. I've got a free quiz actually, and a number of other. There's a compassionate workbook as well that has a profiling tool in it. It's not scientific as such, but it's useful. Um, and perhaps we can link to those in the show notes because I think it's really important to identify when your empathy is when you're expressing empathy, how you are expressing empathy, whether that empathy is going in overdrive, and then using the leadership dials to bring it back down to saying, actually, I can choose when I help, who I help, and how I help.
Mm,
I pull all of that together actually in the book, but it's that kind of emotional boundary that we often need, that we often overlook because we think we should be giving more and more and more and more. No, this stops, and you can choose without guilt. And people might get upset, yeah, of course, if you start saying no or pushing back, but that's
yeah.
not your problem. It's more important for you to reserve your and protect your energy and your effort, in order to prevent feeling resentful and feeling stressed and feeling exhausted. So that's my kind of my bite-sized take home, really, I think.
I love that. I think the boundaries are very important. I know when I coach CEOs, that's one of the things we talk about is like one of your superpowers is to learn how to say no. To be because I think as you said, is we're more empathetic, we tend to take on more of the burdens from others. So creating those healthy boundaries and learning when to say no and like you mentioned, who should I help and why and then and maybe building some of those barriers will help you do other things in your career to take that gift that you have as empathy and actually make that something that can help you achieve the things you want in life and in your business life and in your personal life. So I
Mm.
think that you're hitting on some really important topics that we all need to think about. So Jess, this has been fantastic. How can our listeners find out more about you? This book is called The Super Helper Syndrome. Your website. How can people find out more about you and the work you do?
Thanks, John. Yeah, jessbaker.co.uk is the website to go to, and everything is on there, from the Empathy Powered Leadership Academy through to private coaching as well. My latest blog on euphorosis will go up imminently, and when I finish it, because that's really new thinking. I'm so excited about that. And then the next program will be the empathic flow, um, which, yeah, I think I'll put that out into the world by Christmas. If you could leave a couple of the links at the bottom of the show notes for the free quiz and for the compassionate at work workbook, that would be great. And of course, you can find me on socials at Jess Baker Psych, PSYCH. So it's Jess Baker Psych, short for psychologist. And I love to connect with people. So from wherever you are in the world, yeah, do link in or follow me on Instagram or something like that. That would be cool.
Fantastic, Jess. We're going to have links in the show notes for all of Jess's resources. And I highly encourage you, if this is something that you've struggled with, whether it's, I've got empathy and, I feel like I'm being passed over, or I don't really have any empathy. I don't really know how to deal with this. So this is your opportunity to talk to an expert. Follow the links below in the show notes and reach out to Jess. She's the expert. She's got a quiz that we're going to link into that. You can do it. She has a YouTube which is a fantastic one. I was just looking through it. Her YouTube channel is talking all about these things that we're talking about with respect to empathy in a lot more detail. So I highly encourage you to do that. So follow the links in the show notes, reach out to Jess, get this book, The Super Helper Syndrome. It's going to help you just be able to say, where does empathy fit in the leadership world that I'm in? And I think you're going to be able to unpack a lot having Jess as an expert. So Jess, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge about this really important topic.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Jon. I'm so glad we got to have this chat together. It's been really powerful for me. So thanks again.
Thank you as well. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is Jon Rennie saying take care and lead well.